The ship used Defiance moved through dark space like a ghost. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge and watched the stars through the main screen. His ship had been running and hiding for 5 long years. 5 years since the bugs came and took everything. The Kethmoran Dominion had swept across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Every world that tried to fight them fell within days. Their black ships moved as one mind, striking fast and hard. The old Galactic Federation broke apart like glass hitting stone. Morrison remembered the day Earth fell. He had been commanding a patrol ship near the outer colonies when the emergency signals came through. By the time any human ship could respond, it was over. 3 billion people now worked in slave camps, building weapons for their new masters. "Captain, we're picking up a Dominion convoy on long-range sensors," said Lieutenant Amy Davis from her position at the tactical station. She was young but tough, with short black hair and cold blue eyes that had seen too much death. Morrison turned to look at the display. 6 enemy ships moved in perfect formation, carrying supplies to some distant outpost. "How many escorts?" 2 heavy cruisers and 4 fighters, standard pattern. Commander Pete Johnson looked up from his engineering console. "Sir, we could take them. The new modifications to our weapons are ready for testing." Morrison nodded slowly. Johnson was the best engineer in the fleet, or what was left of it. He had been working day and night to give them any edge against the enemy. The man never slept and lived on coffee and determination. "Dr. Grant, how are our wounded from the last fight?" Morrison asked. Dr. Lisa Grant turned from her medical station. 2 crew members are still in sick bay, but they'll live. "We lost good people last week, Jake. Are we really going to keep doing this?" The bridge fell quiet. Everyone knew what she meant. They were one ship against an empire. They could run hit and run attacks for years and never make a real difference. But Morrison also knew they were all that was left of the human military in this sector. "We do this because we have to," he said. "Every supply ship we destroy means fewer weapons pointed at human colonies. Every day we stay free means hope is still alive." Security Chief Don Roberts spoke from his station near the door. "Sir, the crew is getting tired. Some of them are asking if we should try to find other survivors instead of fighting." Morrison looked at Roberts. The man was honest, which Morrison respected. Roberts had family on Earth, a wife and 2 children he hadn't seen in 5 years. Half the crew had the same story. "Set a course to intercept the convoy," Morrison ordered. "All hands to battle stations." The ship turned toward the enemy formation. Morrison felt the familiar weight in his chest that came before every fight. They had been lucky so far, but luck always ran out eventually. "Captain, I'm reading something." "Strange," Davis said, her voice tight with excitement. "The convoy is carrying data transmissions, high-level stuff. Can you break the encryption?" "Maybe. Give me a few minutes." Morrison watched the tactical display as they closed distance with the enemy ships. The Dominion cruisers were bigger than the Defiance, but human ships were faster and more flexible. That had kept them alive this long. "Got it," Davis announced. "Captain, you need to see this." The main screen changed to show decoded text and star charts. Morrison read quickly, his eyes growing wide. The transmission showed the location of a major Dominion facility in the Nexus sector, deep in the heart of enemy space. "What is it?" Johnson asked. "Their command center," Morrison said quietly. "The place where they coordinate all fleet movements across the galaxy." The bridge crew stared at the screen in silence. They all understood what this meant. The Central Command Matrix was the brain of the entire Dominion military. Without it, their perfect coordination would fall apart. "Sir, we're in weapons range," Davis reported. Morrison barely heard her. His mind was racing with possibilities. If they could somehow reach that facility and destroy it, the entire war could change. Every enslaved world might have a chance to break free. "Captain?" Davis asked again. "Fire all weapons," Morrison ordered. "But keep one of those cruisers alive. I want to download their navigation data." The Defiance opened fire with everything they had. Johnson's new weapon modifications tore through enemy shields like paper. The first cruiser exploded in seconds. The fighters tried to scatter, but human targeting systems were too fast. The second cruiser tried to run, but Davis put 3 missiles into its engines. The ship went dark and started drifting. "Boarding party ready, sir," Roberts reported. "Take a small team and get everything you can from their computers. I want star charts, patrol routes, and anything else that might help us." As Roberts left, with his team, Morrison stared at the star chart still displayed on the main screen. The Nexus sector was hundreds of light years away, through the most heavily defended space in the galaxy. It would be suicide to go there, but it might also be the only chance humanity had left. Dr. Grant moved to stand beside him. "You're thinking about going there, aren't you?" Morrison didn't answer right away. He thought about Earth, about 3 billion people in chains. He thought about the other human colonies that had fallen silent one by one. He thought about his crew, who had followed him through 5 years of running and fighting. "Maybe," he said finally, "it would be a one-way trip. Maybe not. Johnson thinks he can modify our stealth systems to get us through their sensor networks. And if he's wrong?" Morrison looked at her. Dr. Grant had been with him since the beginning. She had patched up his crew after every battle and never complained about the impossible situations he put them in. "Then we die fighting instead of running," he said. "At least our deaths might mean something." The boarding party returned an hour later with data files from the enemy ship. Roberts looked grim as he handed Morrison a datapad. "Sir, it's worse than we thought. They're preparing for a final push against the last free worlds. Every human colony will be gone within 6 months." Morrison read the intelligence report and felt his heart sink. The Dominion was gathering the largest fleet in galactic history. No world would be able to stand against it. He looked around at his crew. These people had given up everything to keep fighting. They deserved to know the truth. "Listen up, everyone," he said. "I'm going to tell you something, and then I'm going to ask you to make a choice." He explained what they had learned about the Central Command Matrix and the location of the Dominion's heart. He told them about the final assault being planned against the free worlds. "We can keep running hit and run attacks until the end comes," he said. "Or we can try something that might change everything. The choice is yours." The bridge fell silent. Morrison waited, knowing that whatever they decided would determine the fate of not just his ship, but possibly the entire galaxy. Amy Davis was the first to speak. "When do we leave for the Nexus sector, sir?" The used Defiance jumped to hyperspace with a destination that meant almost certain death. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair and watched the blue glow of hyperspace tunnel around his ship. They were heading deep into enemy territory. With outdated maps and desperate hope. Commander Pete Johnson had been working for 3 days straight to modify their stealth systems. The man looked like death warmed over, with dark circles under his eyes and coffee stains on his uniform. But his modifications were their only chance of getting past Dominion sensors. "How long until we reach the first checkpoint?" Morrison asked. Lieutenant Amy Davis checked her navigation console. 6 hours, sir. That's where we'll know if the stealth modifications work." Dr. Lisa Grant looked up from her medical station. "Captain, I've been treating more crew members for stress and anxiety. Some of them aren't sleeping." "They know this is a suicide mission," Morrison nodded. He couldn't blame them. They were taking one ship against the heart of an empire that controlled half the galaxy. The smart thing would be to run to the outer rim and hide until the war was over. Security. Chief Don Roberts approached the captain's chair. His face was troubled. "Sir, I need to talk to you privately." They walked to Morrison's ready room behind the bridge. Roberts closed the door and turned to face his captain. "Some of the crew are talking," Roberts said. "They think you've lost your mind. They want to turn around and find other human survivors instead of throwing their lives away." Morrison poured himself a cup of coffee and offered one to Roberts. The security chief shook his head. "How many?" Morrison asked. "Maybe 30 or 40. Not enough to cause real trouble, but enough to worry about." Morrison sat down at his desk. He had expected this. Leading people into almost certain death was never easy, even when it was the right thing to do. "What do you think, Don?" Roberts was quiet for a long moment. "I think you're crazy. I also think you might be right. If we don't try this, everyone, dies anyway. At least this way we might accomplish something. Keep an eye on the situation. If anyone wants to leave when we reach a safe system, let me know." Roberts nodded and left. Morrison sat alone in his ready room, thinking about the choice he had made for his crew. Command was a heavy burden, especially when you were asking people to die for a plan that might not work. The ship dropped out of hyperspace 6 hours later in a system on the edge of Dominion space. Immediately, the bridge crew went to work scanning for enemy patrols. "I'm reading 2 Dominion destroyers on the far side of the system," Davis reported. "They haven't seen us yet." Johnson looked at his engineering displays. "Stealth systems are working perfectly. Our heat signature is almost 0 and our electromagnetic output is masked." Morrison felt a small bit of relief. The first test had worked. But they still had hundreds of light years to go through increasingly dangerous space. Set course for the next jump point. Keep us away from those destroyers. They move through the system like a ghost, staying in the shadow of asteroids and gas clouds. The Dominion ships continued their patrol pattern, never knowing that a human warship was passing right under their noses. Over the next week, they jumped from system to system, going deeper into enemy territory. Each jump brought new dangers. They passed massive Dominion fleet formations, supply bases, and patrol squadrons. The stealth systems held, but Morrison could see the strain on his crew. Dr. Grant reported more cases of stress disorders. People were having nightmares about being captured and tortured. The ship's counselor was working overtime trying to keep everyone mentally stable. "Captain, long-range sensors are picking up something big," Davis announced during their 8th day of travel. Morrison looked at the tactical display. Ahead of them was the largest fleet formation any of them had ever seen. Hundreds of Dominion ships were gathered in a staging area, preparing for some massive operation. "Take us closer, but keep us hidden," Morrison ordered. They moved into the outer edge of the system, using a large asteroid field for cover. What they saw made everyone on the bridge go silent. Over 1,000 Dominion warships filled the space around an artificial space station. Supply ships moved constantly between the fleet and the station. Fighter squadrons practiced attack formations. It was clearly preparation for a major assault. "Sir, I'm picking up communication traffic," Davis said. "Give me a minute to decode." Morrison watched the enemy fleet and felt a chill run down his spine. This had to be the final assault force they had read about in the captured intelligence. The force that would crush the last free worlds. "Got it," Davis announced. "They're calling it Operation Final Strike. Target date is in 3 weeks. Johnson looked up from his console. "Captain, if this fleet launches, there won't be any free worlds left to liberate. Earth will be the only human world, and it's already under their control." Morrison stared at the massive enemy formation. Even if they could reach the central command matrix and destroy it, would they be in time to stop this assault? 3 weeks wasn't much time. "Are we picking up any technical data from their ships?" he asked. Davis worked at her station for several minutes. "Yes, sir. I'm reading their communication frequencies and coordination protocols. There's something strange, though." "What?" "All the ships are linked to a central network. Every tactical decision, every movement order, everything comes from a single source. If that source went down, they wouldn't be able to coordinate at all." Morrison felt a spark of hope. This confirmed what they had suspected about the Dominion's weakness. Their strength came from perfect coordination, but that same coordination could be turned against them. "Download everything you can, then we move on." They spent 2 hours collecting intelligence on the enemy fleet before quietly slipping away. As they prepared to jump to hyperspace, Morrison called a crew meeting in the main cargo bay. 800 men and women gathered to hear what their captain had to say. Morrison looked out at their faces and saw fear, determination, and trust. These people had followed him for 5 years through the worst war in human history. "I'm going to be honest with you," he began. "What we saw back there changes everything. The Dominion is preparing to finish the war in 3 weeks. Every free world will fall, including the colonies where some of your families might be hiding. The crowd was silent, but Morrison could see the impact of his words on their faces. We're still 5 days from the Nexus sector. Even if we succeed in destroying their command center, it might be too late to stop that fleet, a voice called out from the crowd. So what do we do, Captain? Morrison looked toward the voice. It was Chief Petty Officer Mike Chun, a veteran who had been with the ship since the war started. We keep going, Morrison said. Because even if we can't save the free worlds, we can still hurt them. We can show them that humans don't give up, even when the odds are impossible. Another voice spoke up. What if some of us don't want to die for a lost cause? Morrison nodded. Then you can leave when we reach the next safe system. I won't force anyone to come on this mission, but I want you to think about something. Every person in this room has lost friends and family to the Dominion. We've been running and hiding while our people suffer in slave camps. He paused and looked around the room. This might be our only chance to hit them where it really hurts. Not just another supply convoy or patrol ship, but their command center. The place where they plan every attack and coordinate every fleet. The cargo bay was quiet for a long moment. Then Chief Chun stepped forward. I'm with you, Captain. My family died when they took the Centauri colonies. I want to make them pay. One by one, other crew members stepped forward. Engineers, medics, security, personnel, pilots. In the end, only 12 people asked to be transferred off the ship at the next safe system DOP as the meeting broke up. Dr. Grant approached Morrison. You know this really is a suicide mission, don't you? Morrison looked at her. Dr. Grant had been his friend for over 10 years, since before the war started. She had every right to question his judgment. Maybe, he said. But what's the alternative? Hide in the outer rim while the galaxy burns? At least this way we're doing something. She nodded slowly. I've been looking at the intelligence data. From that fleet, there's something you need to know. What? They're not just using human prisoners as laborers. They're using human scientists and engineers to improve their technology. Our people are being forced to help them build better weapons. Morrison felt anger building in his chest. It wasn't enough that the Dominion had conquered human worlds. They were also forcing humans to help in their own destruction. All the more reason to stop them, he said. 2 days later, they reached a system with a hidden rebel base. Morrison kept his word and allowed the 12 crew members who wanted to leave to transfer off the ship. He also sent a complete copy of all their intelligence data to the rebel commanders. As the Defiance prepared to leave, Morrison received a message from the rebel leader. Captain Morrison, what you're planning is impossible. But if anyone can do it, it's you and your crew. Good luck. They jumped back into hyperspace, now only 3 days from the Nexus sector. Morrison stood on the bridge and watched the hyperspace tunnel flow around them. Soon they would reach the heart of enemy space, where the Central Command Matrix waited. Behind them, they left their last connection to safety. Ahead lay either victory or death. There was no turning back now. The Nexus sector appeared on the main screen like a vision from hell. Captain Jake Morrison stared at 3 artificial worlds, surrounded by thousands of enemy ships. The heart of the Dominion Empire was more massive than anything his crew had imagined. My God, whispered Lieutenant Amy Davis from her tactical station. Look at the size of those stations. Each artificial world was bigger than Earth's moon, covered in dark metal structures that pulsed with alien energy. Ships moved between them in perfect formations, carrying supplies and new constructions. The scale of the operation was beyond human understanding. Commander Pete Johnson worked frantically at his engineering console. Captain, our stealth systems are being pushed to their limits. There are sensors everywhere, and some of them are using technology I've never seen before. Morrison nodded grimly. They had made it this far, but now came the real test. They needed to get close enough to scan the facilities and find the Central Command Matrix. Take us into the asteroid field on the edge of the system, he ordered. We need cover while we figure out what we're dealing with. The used Defiance moved carefully between large rocks and debris. The asteroids had been mined out long ago, leaving hollow shells that provided perfect hiding spots. Morrison was grateful for the cover. Because enemy patrols were everywhere. Dr. Lisa Grant looked up from her science station. Captain, I'm reading massive biosignatures from those artificial worlds. There are millions of life forms down there, and most of them aren't Dominion. Prisoners? It looks that way. The energy patterns suggest they're being used to power some kind of network. Their brain activity is being channeled into a central system. Morrison felt sick. The Dominion wasn't just enslaving other species for labor. They were using them as living computers, draining their minds to power their war machine. Can you identify any of the species? He asked. Dr. Grant worked at her console for several minutes. I'm reading human brain patterns among them. Hundreds of thousands of humans are connected to that network. The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. Their own people were being used as living parts in the enemy's command system. Every tactical decision, every fleet movement, was being processed through human minds. Security Chief Don Roberts spoke from his position near the door. Sir, if we attack that facility, we'll be killing our own people. Morrison closed his eyes. This was worse than he had imagined. The central command matrix wasn't just a computer system. It was powered by the enslaved minds of every species the Dominion had conquered. Amy, can you identify which artificial world houses the main command center? He asked. Davis worked at her tactical station, scanning the three massive structures. The middle one, sir. It's generating the strongest signals and has the heaviest defenses. Energy shields that would take our entire weapons load just to scratch. Johnson looked up from his engineering console. Captain, I've been analyzing their defense grid. It's not just shields and weapons. They're using the psychic energy from the prisoners to power everything. If we could somehow disrupt that connection, we'd kill everyone connected to it. Dr. Grant finished. Hundreds of thousands of innocent people. Morrison stared at the tactical display. They had come so far and sacrificed so much to reach this place. But now he faced an impossible choice. Destroy the command center and save the galaxy, but kill millions of prisoners in the process. Or let the Dominion continue their conquest and enslave billions more. There has to be another way, he said. For the next 6 hours, they studied the enemy facility from their hiding place. Johnson and his engineering team worked on ways to penetrate the defenses. Davis analyzed patrol patterns and weapon emplacements. Dr. Grant tried to understand how the psychic network functioned. Captain, I think I found something, Dr. Grant announced. The psychic network has safety protocols built into it. If the connection is severed gradually instead of all at once, the prisoners might survive. Morrison looked at her with hope. How gradually? We'd need to disrupt the network in stages, sector by sector. It would take time, and we'd have to stay in the facility to do it manually. How much time? At least 2 hours, maybe more. Johnson shook his head. Sir, there's no way we could survive in that facility for 2 hours. The moment we start the disruption, every defense system will focus on stopping us. Morrison walked to the center of the bridge and looked at his crew. These people had followed him into the heart of enemy space on a mission everyone knew was suicide. Now he was asking them to choose between mass murder and certain death. Options? He asked. Amy Davis looked up from her station. We could try a different approach. Instead of destroying the command center, we could try to take control of it. Use their own network against them. Explain. If we could get someone inside the facility, they might be able to reprogram the network. Turn it from a tool of conquest into a tool of liberation. Dr. Grant nodded slowly. It's possible. The psychic network connects to every Dominion ship. In the galaxy, if we could change the control signals, we could turn their own fleet against them, Morrison finished. Johnson was already working on his console. I could modify our transport systems to get a small team past their shields. But whoever goes in there isn't coming back out. Morrison looked around the bridge. I'll lead the infiltration team. Sir, with respect, that's not a good idea, Roberts said. You're needed here to command the ship. Let me take a team in. This is my mission, Don, my responsibility. Dr. Grant stepped forward. Jake, if someone needs to interface with the psychic network, it should be me. I understand how it works better than anyone. Morrison shook his head. I won't ask you to sacrifice yourself. You're not asking. I'm volunteering. Those prisoners down there include my former colleagues from the Medical Research Station on Proxima. Dr. Kate Phillips is among them. I can't leave her there. Morrison looked at Dr. Grant and saw the determination in her eyes. Kate Phillips had been her research partner for years before the war started. They had been working on breakthrough treatments for neural disorders when the Dominion attacked. Lisa, you go in there, you're not coming back. I know, but maybe I can free them all instead of just killing them. Lieutenant Davis looked up from her console. Captain, long-range sensors are detecting fleet movements. That massive assault force we saw is starting to deploy. Morrison felt time running. Out. Operation Final Strike was beginning, and they were still days away from being ready to act. How long before they reached the first target worlds? He asked. At current speed, maybe 18 hours. Morrison made his decision. We go in tonight. Lisa put together a plan for taking control of the network. Don, select a team for the infiltration. Pete, get those transport modifications ready. The next few hours were a blur of preparation. Dr. Grant studied every detail of the psychic network she could scan from their position. Roberts chose 6 of his best security personnel for the infiltration team. Johnson worked on transport modifications and weapon upgrades. As night fell over the artificial worlds, the Defiance began moving toward the central facility. They used the cover of supply ship traffic to get closer, their stealth systems hiding them among the regular cargo vessels. Facility is 2 kilometers ahead, Davis reported. Transport range in 30 seconds. Morrison looked at the infiltration team assembled near the transport pad. Dr. Grant carried a medical kit and data pad. Roberts and his security team were armed with pulse rifles and explosives. They all knew they weren't coming back. Remember, Morrison said, your job is to get Lisa to the network control center. Once she's in, she needs at least 30 minutes to reprogram the system. Roberts nodded. We'll hold them off as long as we can, sir. Dr. Grant approached Morrison. Jake, if this works, the psychic network will send new orders to every Dominion ship in the galaxy. They'll turn on each other or shut down completely. The war could be over in hours. And if it doesn't work? She smiled sadly. Then at least we tried to save them instead of just killing them. The transport beam activated, taking the infiltration team directly into the heart of the enemy facility. Morrison watched them disappear and felt a cold weight in his stomach. Transport successful, Johnson reported. They're inside. On the main screen, alarms began flashing throughout the facility. The Dominion had detected the intrusion and was responding with overwhelming force. All ships in the system are converging on our position, Davis announced. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they find us? Morrison looked at the tactical display. Hundreds of enemy ships were moving toward their location. The Defiance couldn't fight them all, but they could buy. Time for the infiltration team. All hands battle stations. We're going to give them the fight of their lives. As the enemy ships closed in, Morrison thought about Dr. Grant and her team somewhere inside that massive facility. They were humanity's last hope, walking into certain death to save not just their own species, but every enslaved race in the galaxy. The first enemy shots lit up the space around them. The real battle was just beginning. The used Defiance shook under enemy fire as hundreds of Dominion ships closed in around them. Captain Jake Morrison gripped his command chair and watched the tactical display fill with red hostile contacts. Return fire on all targets, he ordered. Give Lisa and her team as much time as we can. Lieutenant Amy Davis unleashed everything they had. Pulse cannons and missile batteries lit up space as the Defiance fought desperately against impossible odds. Several enemy ships exploded, but more kept coming. Commander Pete Johnson worked frantically at his engineering station. Shields at 60% and falling. Hull damage on decks 7 and 12. We can't take much more of this. Inside the enemy facility, Dr. Lisa Grant and Security Chief Don Roberts led their team through corridors that pulsed with alien energy. The walls themselves seemed alive, covered in biomechanical systems that monitored their every move. "This way," Dr. Grant said, checking her scanner. "The network control center should be 3 levels down." They moved quickly through the facility, following maintenance passages that Dr. Grant had identified from the ship's scans. Behind them, they could hear Dominion forces mobilizing to hunt them down. Roberts and his team took point, weapons ready. They encountered their first enemy patrol at a junction between corridors. The firefight was brief but intense. 3 Dominion soldiers fell, but Roberts lost one of his men. "Keep moving," he ordered. "They know where we are now." On the Defiance, Morrison watched his ship take hit after hit from the overwhelming enemy force. They had managed to destroy a dozen enemy ships, but hundreds more surrounded them. "Captain, we've lost main engines," Johnson reported. "Switching to emergency power. We're dead in space." Morrison looked at the main screen as enemy ships moved. In for the kill, but something strange was happening. Some of the Dominion ships were slowing down, as if they were receiving conflicting orders. "Amy, are you seeing this?" he asked. Davis checked her sensors. "Yes, sir." Some of the enemy ships seem to be having coordination problems. Their formation is breaking apart. Inside the facility, Dr. Grant's team had reached the network control center. The room was vast, filled with glowing columns that contained thousands of imprisoned minds. Human, alien, all connected to the massive system that coordinated the Dominion war machine. "My God," whispered one of Robert's men. "They're all still alive in there." Dr. Grant moved to the central control console, her hands shaking as she accessed the network's command systems. The interface was alien but logical. She could see the connections between every imprisoned mind and the ships they controlled. "Done." "I found her," she said, pointing to one of the glowing columns. "Kate Phillips. She's still alive." Roberts looked at the column and saw a human woman suspended in biofluid, her eyes closed but her brain active. Cables connected her skull to the network, using her mind to process tactical data for dozens of Dominion ships. "Can you free them?" he asked. "I'm going to try something better. I'm going to turn them into weapons against their captors." Dr. Grant's fingers flew over the control interface. She was reprogramming the network, changing the command codes that controlled the Dominion fleet. Instead of coordinating attacks on free worlds, the network would send orders to attack other Dominion forces. Alarms began sounding throughout the facility. Dominion soldiers poured into the control center, firing their weapons at the infiltration. Team Roberts and his men took cover behind the control consoles and returned fire. "How much more time do you need?" he shouted over the noise of battle. 5 more minutes," Dr. Grant called back. "I'm almost through their security protocols." The Defiance, Morrison watched in amazement as the enemy ships around them suddenly changed targets. Half of the Dominion fleet began attacking the other half, their perfect coordination replaced by chaos and confusion. "What's happening?" Davis asked. "Lisa did it," Morrison said with a smile. "She's turning their own network against them." Johnson looked up from his damaged console. "Sir, I'm reading massive power fluctuations from the facility. Whatever she's doing is causing system-wide failures." Inside the control center, Dr. Grant made the final connections. The network was now under her control, and she could feel the minds of thousands of prisoners suddenly awakening to their situation. "Kate, can you hear me?" she said, speaking directly into the network interface. Dr. Kate Phillips' voice came through the speakers, weak but determined. "Lisa? Is that really you?" "Yes, it's me. I'm going to get you all out of there." "You can't. The network will kill us if you try to disconnect us." "But Lisa, you can use us. We're connected to every Dominion ship in the galaxy. We can turn them all." Dr. Grant understood. The prisoners couldn't be freed without dying, but they could choose how their minds were used. Instead of being tools of conquest, they could become instruments of liberation. "Do it," Kate Phillips said. "We've been waiting for this chance for years." Dr. Grant activated the final program. Across the galaxy, every Dominion ship connected to the network received new orders. "Attack your fellow ships. Shut down your weapons. Return to base and surrender." The effect was immediate and devastating. The massive fleet preparing for Operation Final Strike turned on itself. Ships that had been coordinating perfectly for years suddenly became enemies. Entire battle groups tore themselves apart in minutes, but the network overload was killing the prisoners. Dr. Grant could see their life signs failing as the system drew too much power from their minds. "Lisa, get out of there," Kate Phillips' voice was fading. "We can hold the network for maybe 10 more minutes. After that, it'll collapse." Roberts grabbed Dr. Grant's arm. "We have to go now. The whole facility is coming apart." Dr. Grant looked at the glowing columns, knowing that thousands of brave people were sacrificing their lives to save the galaxy. She wanted to stay with them, but Roberts was right. They had to escape before the facility exploded. The infiltration team fought their way back through corridors filled with smoke and sparking electronics. Dominion soldiers were in full retreat, their command structure collapsing along with the network. "Defiance, this is Roberts," he called into his communicator. "Emergency transport now." On the ship's bridge, Morrison was coordinating their escape from the chaos around them. Enemy ships were still destroying each other, creating a field of debris and explosions. "Johnson, get those transport systems online," he ordered. "Working on it, sir. The damage is making it difficult." The transport beam activated just as the facility's central core began to overload. Dr. Grant and the surviving members of the infiltration team materialized on the Defiance's transport pad. Morrison rushed to meet them. "Lisa, are you all right?" Dr. Grant looked exhausted and heartbroken. "They're all dead, Jake, Kate, and thousands of others. They died to save us." "They died to save everyone," Morrison corrected. "Look at what they accomplished." On the main screen, the Dominion fleet was destroying itself. Ships exploded or went dark as their crews lost all coordination. The perfect war machine that had conquered the galaxy was tearing itself apart. "Captain, I'm reading similar effects across all Dominion-controlled space," Davis reported. "Their entire fleet is in chaos. They're attacking each other or just shutting down." Johnson managed a weak smile from his damaged console. "Sir, we're picking up transmissions from free worlds. They're reporting that Dominion forces are withdrawing or surrendering." Morrison felt a weight lift from his shoulders. After 5 years of running and fighting, the war was finally turning in their favor, but their victory came at a terrible cost. The facility was collapsing around them, and the Defiance was badly damaged. Half the ship's systems were offline, and they were surrounded by the wreckage of the enemy fleet. "Johnson, can we get out of here?" Morrison asked. The engineer shook his head. "Main engines are destroyed. Life support is failing. We're not going anywhere soon." Dr. Grant looked up from the medical scanner she was using on the wounded infiltration team members. "Jake, we need to get to a medical facility. Roberts has internal injuries, and 2 of his men won't make it without surgery." Morrison looked around the damaged bridge. They had won the battle and possibly the war, but they might not live to see the victory. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Any friendly ships in the area?" he asked. Davis worked at her partially functioning console. "I'm trying to reach the rebel base we left 3 days ago, but communications are damaged." Suddenly, Johnson's console lit up with new contacts. "Captain, multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. They're not Dominion." On the main screen, Morrison saw the most beautiful sight of his life. A mixed fleet of human and alien ships was entering the system. He recognized some of the designs from the old Galactic Federation. "This is Admiral Sarah Mitchell of the Liberation Fleet to UES Defiance." "Captain Morrison, are you receiving?" Morrison grabbed the communications panel. "Admiral Mitchell, this is Morrison. We're badly damaged but alive. We monitored the network collapse from 3 systems away. Every Dominion ship in our sector just shut down or started attacking each other. What did you do?" Morrison looked at Dr. Grant, who was still treating the wounded. "We gave their prisoners a chance to fight back, Admiral. They used the enemy's own network to destroy them. Stand by for rescue operations. We have medical ships and repair crews on the way." As rescue ships moved in to help the Defiance, Morrison walked over to Dr. Grant. She was working on Roberts. who was 6 months after the collapse of the Dominion network, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the U's Liberation, watching Earth grow larger on the main screen. The blue and green world looked exactly as he remembered it, but everything had changed. The planet was free again. 3 billion humans had broken their chains when the Dominion forces lost coordination. Cities that had been slave camps were now rebuilding themselves. The orbital stations that had housed enemy troops were being converted into medical centers and refugee facilities. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from Earth Command," reported Lieutenant Amy Davis. She wore the uniform of the new Liberation Fleet now, with commander's stripes on her sleeves. Morrison smiled at his former tactical officer. Davis had been promoted after their mission to the Nexus sector, and she deserved every bit of recognition she received. "Put it through, Commander." Admiral Sarah Mitchell appeared on the main screen. Behind her, Morrison could see the busy command center of Earth's new defense headquarters. "Jake, welcome home. How did the patrol go?" Morrison looked at the report on his datapad. "All clear, Admiral. We checked 15 systems in the former Dominion territory. No organized resistance, just scattered survivors asking for help getting home. It had been the same story for months now. The Dominion Empire had collapsed so completely that most of their forces were just trying to survive without the network. To coordinate them, their military had fallen apart in days. Any word on the prisoner liberation efforts?" Morrison asked. "Better than we hoped. Dr. Grant's medical teams have processed over 2 million former prisoners. Most of them are recovering well, though some need long-term treatment." Morrison nodded. Dr. Lisa Grant had thrown herself into the medical relief efforts after their return from the Nexus sector. She ran treatment centers on 6 different worlds, helping people who had been connected to the Dominion network for years. "Admiral, what's the status of the new Federation?" "The founding ceremony is next week. 43 species have agreed to join, including humanity. We're calling it the Free Worlds Alliance." Morrison felt a surge of pride. After years of war and suffering, the galaxy was coming together again. But this time it would be different. The new alliance was based on cooperation, not central control. "Captain, we're being hailed by the U's Defiance," Davis reported. Morrison turned toward the communications station. His old ship had been fully repaired and was now commanded by his former security chief, Don Roberts. The man had recovered from his injuries and requested his own command. "Jake, this is Don. We just finished escorting a convoy of refugees back to the Centauri colonies. The settlements are growing fast." "Good to hear, Don. How's your crew?" "Half of them are former Dominion prisoners who wanted to help with the liberation efforts. They know these systems better than anyone," Morrison smiled. It was common now for former prisoners to join Liberation Fleet crews. They had intimate knowledge of Dominion territory and strong motivation to help other survivors. "Captain," Davis said, "we're receiving priority transmissions from multiple sectors." "It looks like celebration messages," Morrison understood. Today marked exactly 6 months since the network collapse. Every liberated world was celebrating Freedom Day, the unofficial holiday that commemorated the end of the Dominion. The main screen filled with messages from across the galaxy. Human colonies, alien homeworlds, space stations, and refugee settlements all sent their thanks to the crew of the original UES Defiance. Morrison read some of the messages aloud to his bridge crew. Children on Proxima Colony had drawn pictures of their ship. Scientists on the vegan research stations had named a new discovery after Dr. Grant. The former prisoners from the network had erected a memorial to Kate Phillips and the thousands who died to free the galaxy. "Commander Davis, take us into Earth. Orbit, I want to see our home up close." As the Liberation moved toward Earth, Morrison thought about the journey that had brought them here. 5 years of running and hiding, followed by one desperate mission that changed everything. His communication console chimed with an incoming personal message. Morrison opened it and saw Dr. Grant's face appear on his private screen. "Jake, I hope you're enjoying the celebration. I wanted you to know that the memorial for Kate and the network prisoners is finished. We're dedicating it tomorrow, Morrison looked at his old friend. Dr. Grant looked tired but satisfied. She had found her purpose in helping the survivors heal from their ordeal. I'll be there, Lisa. How are you holding up? Better every day. The patients are responding well to treatment, and we're learning more about how to help them. Some of them are even asking to join the medical teams, Morrison nodded. He had seen former prisoners throughout the Liberation Fleet, eager to help. Others who had suffered like they did. Their experience made them uniquely qualified to understand what survivors needed. Jake, there's something else. We've been getting reports from the Deep Rim territories. Some Dominion remnants are trying to rebuild their forces, Morrison frowned. They had known this would happen eventually. The Dominion Empire had been vast, and not every outpost had been connected to the central network when it collapsed. How serious is the threat? Not very, according to intelligence reports. They're small groups, maybe a few ships each. But they're raiding colonies for supplies and prisoners. Morrison made a note to discuss this with Admiral Mitchell. The galaxy was healing, but it still needed protection while it recovered. The Liberation reached Earth orbit and took position near the growing space station that served as Liberation Fleet headquarters. Morrison could see dozens of ships from different species working together, building something new. Commander Johnson appeared on his engineering console. The man had been promoted to chief engineer of the entire Liberation Fleet, but he still checked in with his old captain regularly. Jake, I wanted to give you an update on the new ship designs. We're incorporating technology from 12 different species, including some improvements based on Dominion systems we captured. Morrison was interested. What kind of improvements? Better shields, more efficient engines and communication systems. That can't be turned against us like the network was. Every ship will have multiple independent systems, so no single failure can cripple the entire fleet, Morrison approved. They had learned hard lessons about the dangers of too much central control. The new fleet would be stronger because each ship could operate independently. His personal communicator chimed again. This time it was a message from the refugee settlements on the Outer Rim. Former prisoners were establishing new colonies, building communities based on cooperation rather than domination. Morrison read the message and felt a warm feeling in his chest. The galaxy wasn't just recovering, it was becoming something better than it had been before the war. Commander Davis, signal Admiral Mitchell. Tell her we're ready for the next patrol assignment. Davis looked surprised. Sir, don't you want to take leave? You haven't been to Earth's surface since we got back. Morrison considered the question. He could go home, visit his family's farm, and try to rebuild a normal life. But the galaxy still needed protection, and he had found his purpose commanding ships full of people dedicated to keeping others free. Maybe later, right now, there are people out there who need help, and we have the best crew in the fleet to provide it? Morrison looked around the bridge at the faces of his crew. Some were original members of the Defiance who had followed him through the darkest days of the war. Others were former prisoners who had joined after liberation, bringing their knowledge and determination to the cause. Together, they represented something new in galactic history. Not conquerors or empire builders, but protectors. People who chose to defend freedom rather than impose their will on others. Set course for the Outer Rim territories, Morrison ordered. Let's go remind the universe that the Age of Empires is over. As the U's Liberation turned away from Earth and jumped to hyperspace, Morrison thought about the words Dr. Grant had spoken months ago in the ruins of the Dominion facility. The prisoners had been ready to die for freedom, waiting years for someone to give them the chance. Now the entire galaxy had that chance. The Dominion was gone, the network was destroyed, and billions of people were free to choose their own destiny. Morrison smiled as he watched the stars blur past in hyperspace. The war was over, but the mission continued. Somewhere out there, people needed help, and the Liberation Fleet would be there to provide it. The lone human warship that had entered the Dominion's domain had become the catalyst for the greatest liberation in galactic history. But more than that, it had shown the universe that sometimes the greatest victories come not from conquest, but from the courage to sacrifice everything for the freedom of others. Morrison settled back in his command chair and prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. The galaxy was free, and he intended to help keep it that way.